Steve had Jerry. Michael had Scotty. LeBron has, well, whoever LeBron wants. And Chap has Mojo. This is Sounding Off with Chap and Mojo.
Welcome to Sounding Off. I'm Chap, coming to you from the 98.5 Rock Studio in Kokomo, Indiana. Got a couple special interviews today, with the first one being Alex Stewart. He's going to talk some Western football and how he got to Western. I'm going to follow that up with Rob Burgess, news editor from Nuvo News Weekly down in Indy. He's going to talk about the Bob Lamey story and his involvement in that and give us a timeline how everything come to pass. So we're going to go ahead and kick it off first with Alex Stewart. Thanks for the time, Coach Stewart. Next on the list is Rob Burgess. He's going to go ahead and give us a rundown on his involvement in the Bob Lamey story that broke earlier this week. On the phone with me now is Rob Burgess, the current news editor of Nuvo in Indianapolis, formerly of the Kokomo Tribune, a podcasting buddy of mine, and just an overall nice guy. Rob, how are we doing today?
Oh, good. Thanks a lot for saying that. I appreciate it.
Well, hey, man, I don't say it if it's not true. You've had a really busy week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to say the least.
The fact that you teased to me a big sports story, because that's not your thing. That's not your scene. So when you can't, I'm referring to the Bob Lamey story. You hit me up Tuesday around 12 in the DMs where it all goes down, and you said, hey, be on the lookout. You didn't tell me anything else, but you knew I was hooked. And then you proceeded to tease me for about 12 more hours. Go ahead and I guess what we're talking about is the Bob Lamey story about him using a racial slur at Colts camp and subsequently resigning. Explain to me your involvement in the timeline of events and how you got involved in this.
Right. So, I mean, he retired on Sunday, right? That was the day that he announced that. Now, for you as a Colts fan, how did you feel about that when it first happened? I remember you mentioned it on your show, but what? Because it seemed like to take a lot of people kind of off guard.
Well, it did, because I was at Colts camp on Friday, and he was there. Like, he did some PA work and everything like that, and there was no sign, there was no indication. So I was like, okay. And when the news came out, I was like, oh, well, that's kind of out of nowhere. But he's old. He's been doing it for a long time. I mean, I didn't think a whole lot of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, because, I mean, the timing seems strange, and, people had questions. But anyway, okay, so I come into work on Monday morning, and one of my colleagues tells me, hey, somebody's gonna call you. They have something to tell you. I'm like, okay, whatever. And then this person, they email me, and they say, hey, when can you talk? And I'm like, I have a meeting at 10 a.m., but just go ahead and call me whenever. And 5 seconds later, the phone rings. So I pick it up, and it's this person who says she's not really telling me what she has to tell me yet, and she's kind of circling that. And I'm like, okay, I'm interested. She's like, are you going to write a story? And I'm like, it depends on what you tell me, and what depends on what you show me. So she proceeds to tell me this story. So I guess I'll say what we've reported and what other people have reported. But she told me, like you said, there's some things that she has told me, including her name. And some other things that, I am not at liberty to talk about, but I'm at liberty to talk about whatever we've reported. So after a radio broadcast, this would have also been on Friday at Colts camp. She told me that Bob Lamey asked if the mics were off, and then he proceeded to tell a story about a racing announcer decades ago who'd used the N-word on air. Now, the person that I'm speaking about is black. So there were other people that witnessed this, but the person I was talking to, is black. So she told him, hey, that's not cool. She immediately objected to it. He apologized. He defended himself. He said, black people use that word all the time. And she said, I'm black and I don't use that word. And so he apologized immediately, and he asked her to keep the incident between them. And then she reported it to Human Resources. So that was Friday. And then on Sunday, of course, he retires, and then he doesn't. Retires and resign has been an issue of contention around this story as well, whether it was one or the other. But so yeah, that was the story she related to me, and I'm like, okay, so did you write this down? she's like, I wasn't recording it, but I did write it down into HR. So she sent me the thing that she sent to HR. So I was like, okay, so at least there's a written record of this. And so I'm like, what do I do? I'm like, okay, I'll talk to my editor and I'll let you know. So then I'm like, oh man. So then at that point, I knew I had something, but I just didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. So.
Why did she come to you, or why did she come to Nuvo?
She knows. I want to be careful about how I say this because I don't want to give anything about her identity away. But she knows one of my colleagues through another just in a social way or maybe in an outside of her capacity of her workplace. I guess let's say. Just they happen to know her just already, so she already had a relationship. Communication with somebody I work with, like just for a totally unrelated reason.
Okay, so you tell me about this about noon on Tuesday.
Yes.
And why does this story get passed off to WTHR?
Well, I mean, there's different reasons for that. It ultimately was above my pay grade, that decision, but I'm actually perfectly fine with it. The story wasn't exactly where I wanted it to be as far as I was going back and forth with her about look, we won't say your name, but I should probably say, and it was later reported so I can say this, Emma's Communications is where she worked. And I'm like, can we just say employee from Emmis? And then she was like, well, can we say employee at, be more vague about it? And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like we gotta say something more than that.
Because you've got to show credibility. You have to show. Yeah, I get that. You've got to be. You've got to be vague enough to protect her, but at the same time, you've got to have substance to show that it's relevant.
Yeah, so I kind of hit a wall with that, and then on the Colts end of it, and I'm looking up these addresses for the first time for the Colts organization. I have no contacts. If this is politics, yeah, I'll I'm in there. But like sports, I'm in new territory for me as a reporter. So. I'm emailing the main numbers for people and saying like, look, I've got this report. What do you tell me where you're thinking of going next with this? Because I've got a tip. And they were just like, they sent me that statement that I eventually put in the story. It was what I got back from, and his name is Steve Campbell. He's the vice president of communications. It's the Colts' long-standing policy not to discuss internal personnel matters. You should feel free to speak with Bob about his retirement. So. Your classic non-denial denial in which they skirt the issue by saying they don't talk about personnel matters and say, "B, talk to him." And I'm like, okay, that's a response. That's not the full thing. You got to give me more. But I kind of hit a wall with them too. So that was one of the major reasons that it was because I kind of felt like I could have reported the story based on what I had. It just wouldn't have been up to my standards. Especially, I'm not somebody that usually lets people not use their name. I mean, most of my reporting is done with people that are willing to go on the record. I'll do it, obviously. In this case, I did too. But this is a very far and few between thing for me.
So, how does this story end up in your lap then? I mean, because obviously Nuvo has other writers. How does it get to you?
Well, she asked my colleague, do you have a sports reporter? And he was like, we have a news editor. And there you are.
Because really, your sports experience, I think, constitutes ending up on my show like 2 or 3 times. That is the
somehow
that is
wandering my way in. Yeah,
that is the depth of Rob Burgess's sports background.
Yeah, and hey, let me just say for WTHR's behalf, because. When, for example, Bob Kravitz, who is on WTHR, when he speaks about the Colts, and I've even heard you talk about him, he speaks with authority, right? He has sources in the Colts. He's very knowledgeable about the Colts. If he says something, it has a little more weight than your average Joe. So when he is able to write about that, you know what I'm saying? There's a little bit more. I mean, I'll do my best. I don't want to say credibility because I feel like I'll have credibility in whatever I do, but I don't have that wealth of background and knowledge and sources already there. it would all be, I'm coming to it for the first time.
So you pass it off to WTHR just because this is a little bit more their wheelhouse as far as they've got a sports department. They've got several guys who are covering sports, like Kravitz, like you just said. So to do the story the best justice, you felt that was the best call.
Well, yeah, and you know, it's not so much important for me to be first as much as it is to be right.
Exactly.
And I'm glad they were first. Like they were totally. I think their story was fine of what they eventually put out there, but like it wasn't important for me to like scoop anybody on this just for the sake of scooping somebody. You don't want to be the one to call for Bush, Florida for Bush in the 2000 election or whatever. There was somebody who did that first, and they were probably very sorry later. You know, when Bush v. Gore went to the Supreme Court or whatever. But you know, like you know, it's okay. It's cool. I like breaking stories. I'll do it if I can, but. You know, I'm fine with the story that I eventually wrote because it was, you know, I felt good about it. So.
Well, and if I'm being honest, you know, and here was the frustrating thing for me in regards to that, because I read your story and I read their story. Their story didn't have anything special. Their story didn't have a sprinkle of major news network sprinkled into it. So for me, I felt, if anything, you almost kind of got robbed a little bit, no pun intended with your name, but you kind of like – you had this first because I knew about it almost 12 hours before they went live with it. Or I knew there was a story.
But, well, you didn't know. I was very vague.
Right. Yeah, let me make that clear.
I didn't say. I was just like, there is a big story.
Right.
Keep your eye on WTHR.
And sorry, I don't want to make it seem like you were coming to me. Like I knew there was a story, so I knew you had it well before they went live with it.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and that's you know, and like I said, I'm fine to say that they broke the story. They were the first ones to publish the interview. They got further than I did with getting her to agree to say where she worked, and they obviously, because you know, after they reached out to the Colts, they gave them a more full explanation, and they also got a thing from Lamey's attorney,
right,
which I then included in my story. But like again, like that was probably a contact they already had.
Yeah,
and I don't have that contact. I could make that contact probably, but I don't already have that number, you know, and they do.
You know, this story, I saw Newsweek shared it. I saw the Washington Post was about it. I mean, so you've got to feel like, you know, whether you're attached to that necessarily or not. I mean, because I saw you retweet. Rob, you have never, ever reposted as much sports stuff in your life as you did in the last 2 days.
It's true. I've gained a newfound interest.
So, I mean, but no, this was a story that made the national rounds, and for me, you know, I'm that's why I wanted you on here, because I feel like you were the first one to kind of to get going with it, and so I just wanted your insight on it. Now, with that said, whether WTHR got the credit, that's beside the point. I know that my boy Rob here had it first. What's been the reaction in the Indy area to the story? Has anybody like called you, coming at you? Has anybody? I mean, what's the feeling?
No, I think it's more like people feel. Look, man, like we've heard all the excuses for why this is okay. There's even the Undefeated, which is a sports site, as you know,
Yes.
has a bingo card that they've made for all the go-to defenses for white people using this word.
Yeah, Jamel Hill of ESPN.
But like this is pretty funny.
Yeah, Jamel Hill of ESPN said they should have that like a long time ago, and so that bingo card popped up probably a month or two ago, and now I see it every time somebody says a racial slur or when a white person does something stupid. That seems to come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the reaction is like, you know, people just don't recognize white privilege, I think, is what it boils down to for a lot of people. And you and I are, you know, white men in America, and, you know, we're recognized that it doesn't make it harder because of our race. Like, our life isn't harder because of that. It doesn't mean our lives aren't hard or we don't struggle and all that. But it's like, this is not one of the things. And it's like, for that wonderful privilege of you having this, you know, special place in society, the deal is that you cannot say one word. And that's all you have to do. Like, just don't say that one word, and you can enjoy the fruits of being white in America. And it's like some people just being told no on that one thing makes them drive them crazy. Like, you know, you hear all the excuses like, oh, rappers use it. Well, you and I, Chap, are fans of Eminem. I would say he's one of the best rappers ever. He has never in 25 years, as far as I know, used that word.
Never.
He's been able to skirt that. You know what I mean? So, like, it's not like the rap excuse doesn't even... And Bob Lamey wasn't rapping also. It had nothing to do with that. So.
Right. I guess, and that's the thing, too, because I saw a lot of stuff on Twitter. There was a radio host for WZPL, the Smiley Show in the morning. She had made some comments, and people attacked her on Twitter pretty hardcore. And it's a lot of white people saying, well, why can't we? Why would you want to?
Yeah, why would you want to?
I agree 100% with what you just said. Life as a white male cannot. It's the easiest to be. It's easier than being a white woman. It's easier than being black, any kind of minority. It's easy to be a white male. Why are we complaining?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's very hard to notice what doesn't happen to you, and so that's what it boils down to for a lot of people is they don't. I could go on forever, but like that's the mindset of somebody that's defending this. Now, the news has broken since my story and WTHR's story has come out. Now, if you'll think back to the story I told about what she told me, so she said that he was relating the story about another broadcaster, a story that had happened on the air decades ago. So they, Wish TV now has, I'm trying to pull the story up here. I had it up a second ago. So anyway, he told a story about Derek Daly. And did you know who that was before?
I did not, but I did my homework because it's like you're going down my stat sheet right here because that was the next thing on my list. He was a freelance guy for like 30 years for Wish TV for their race coverage.
I see. Okay. So anyway, he has been identified by Wish TV as the person that Bob Lamey was telling the story about, saying he said the N-word on the air and, the rest of it. But
which timeout? So, think about that. This is back in the 80s, and that's what I heard. He said it on air during a broadcast. Said it on air. 30 years ago, no one batted an eye at this.
This is a very interesting wrinkle to me because I think that the conversation you have around Bob Lamey is very different than what we're having about Derek Daly. Because, as you said, he is relating the story about him saying something on the air over, from what I understand, it was the early 80s. And that is, I was born in 83, so this could be longer than I had even been alive, is what we're talking about here. So he, I guess, was fired by Wish TV as soon as they found out he was the one. But it's like he was nowhere near the room where Lamey told the story, and Lamey was just relating something that had happened on the radio, on air. He's relating something off air that happened on air, and it's a whole new dimension to this.
I think giving the status of these men and their age, a lot of people are real quick to just chalk it up to they were raised differently or that it's they're just old, they don't know any better. But for me, I look at this, and if you look at how the landscape has changed socially over the last 5 years, how are you not socially aware? How do you not realize that things are changing? And especially in Bob Lamey's situation, where you have been around a sport that is predominantly African-American, some of your favorite people are Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, Edgerrin James, all black athletes, and you feel it's okay that whether it's a casual setting or just telling a story or whatsoever, that you get to use that word? Are we stupid, or how ignorant is this? I mean, I find it. Hold on, let me just finish my thought here. I find it upsetting because it's just a lack of awareness, and I think it's ignorance, and it's almost like you're willingly disregarding how things are now.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely, and plus, I've been reporting on the Papa John's situation, and that happened before Lamey told this story. He was aware of that, I'm sure. So he knows that even if he thinks it's okay in his mind to say that it is like it's over, like the party is over. Like if you could say it, yeah, it's interesting. But look, this guy was born before Pearl Harbor. Okay, I'm sure the world has changed a lot since he's been a kid. But just that's okay. It's changed. Time to not say that word in public anymore. But, okay, so I wanted to read this because this is a statement that Derek Daly provided to the media after he was fired by Wish TV. All right, it's a little bit long, but I'll try to be quick. In the early 1980s, after I had recently relocated to the United States, I was interviewed by radio reporter Larry Henry, and I was asked about my situation with my new American team. I responded by explaining that I was a foreign driver now in America driving for an American team, with an American crew and with an American sponsor, and that if things did not go well, the only N-word in the woodpile would be me. At the time, I meant that I, as the new foreigner on the team, would shoulder the blame and I would be the scapegoat. This was not in any way, shape, or form meant to be a racial slur. This phrase was commonly used in Ireland, Britain, and Australia. When I used that phrase in the early 80s, I had no idea that in this country that phrase had a horribly different meaning and connotation and was commonplace in Ireland. After moving to the U.S., I quickly learned what a derogatory term it was. When I was informed of this, I was mortified at the offense I might have caused people. I therefore never used the word since. I made the mistake once, but never again. As someone, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's his defense, okay, is that he used this antiquated phrase from, and I looked it up, and N-word in the woodpile, its origin is from the Underground Railroad when slaves would hide in woodpiles to ride to the north. So even the, meaning of it is racist. So that's an interesting excuse. It's another wrinkle in this because he's saying that it's like a cultural thing, that they say this in these countries and they don't say it here and he didn't think about it or didn't know, or I don't know. What do you think of that?
I don't like ignorance as an excuse. I just hate it. I'm not a fan. Just to parlay it in other sports, we're the Urban Meyer thing at Ohio State right now. Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance does not give you an out to make bad decisions. And I'm sorry. I don't know. Look, the people. Do I think Bob Lamey is a racist? Absolutely not. Do I think Derek Daly is a racist? Absolutely not. But you don't get a pass. You don't get an excuse from where you're from or the age in which you grew up or anything like that. Not when you.
And by the way, black people have a reason to be suspicious of you if you're white. You have to prove yourself not to be racist because a lot of white people are. All the people that are getting upset that they can't say this word anymore. It's this is why we have to be careful about this because it's I think your take on it was the only correct one. Just don't use it. Just don't use it if you're a white person. Just don't try.
There's not.
You will fail.
Look, and you and I are both hip hop and rap fans. In my younger day, when I'm in my vehicle, bumping the music, would I sing along? I think most people would say yes. But to be honest, as an adult, by the time I was in my early 20s, I realized I got to pump the brakes on this. As a 22-year-old Midwestern white kid, I was able to put two and two together in my own head.
Well, think about the other words that we've changed on in our lifetimes. I don't know about you, but it was perfectly acceptable in my high school if someone you'd be like, "Oh, that's gay," or use retarded instead of mentally handicapped.
Yep.
Those were in our lifetimes. We've had to cut. The organization for mentally handicapped people had to change their name in 2006. I could be wrong, but it was very recently. So it's within the span of time we've been alive, those words have changed. And it's if you and I can make that leap in our head. Oh, if I call something gay and I'm meaning it as a put down, maybe that makes gay people feel bad. Right. Just don't use it that way. Well, eliminate it from your vocabulary in that context. And in this case, in the N-word context, eliminate it altogether. But yes, have I ever, in the privacy of my own car, when listening to Snoop Dogg or Ludacris or something, let it pass from my lips for the sake of lyrical consistency? Yes, I'm not going to say I haven't done that. But does that mean that I'm going to be are the mics off? Hey, guys, I got a hilarious story about the N-word in which I'm going to say it in front of you. That's a totally different thing. And also, when you know better, you do better. And I think that, like you said, the ignorance excuse is a poor one overall, I think.
I think if you're in a position now where you have to look around to see who's around or ask if the mics are on or not before you tell a story or tell a joke, you don't tell it. Just flat out. There's no reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if your job is to talk.
Absolutely.
For a living.
Right. Now, doesn't it seem like this with Bob Lamey and the Colts and everything? Doesn't it seem like this could have been avoided? I mean, the Colts. I think the big problem that all started this is, it's one thing if Lamey comes in and resigns, and that's what it's said as. But they gave him a hero send off. They talk about putting him in the Ring of Honor. They talk about we lost a legend. For me, I can understand where that employee who filed the claim was like, this guy's walking away scot-free. He's being celebrated for his career when really, this is a big black eye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you've ever heard the phrase "the cover-up's worse than the crime," it's always the case that the attempts to obfuscate what happened inevitably are worse than because eventually they had to come out and admit this was the reason. I didn't get to the end of my story, but that the Colts eventually did just be like, look, yes, he said this, and this, Now, although apparently when they texted their statement to Bob Kravitz, they said that autocorrect changed it from retired to resigned, and that it was actually retired still. So there's a little bit of contention over whether or not that word was used. But anyway, yes, they had to come out and eventually just say this anyway. And they went through all this headache and all this bad publicity because... But what? They wanted to just they just hoped it wouldn't come out, I guess, was their plan. I don't know. That never seems to work out. It always seems to come to the light. I want to go back to Papa John. Ball State, his alma mater, said that they were supporting him. And then the same day, Purdue University said, we're stripping his name off the building and giving back $8 million he gave us.
Oh, yeah. Purdue doubled down. They're like, oh, yeah, we'll do you one better. We'll give all the money back.
And then what did Ball State eventually have to do? They had to do what they were always going to have to do but it caused an uproar first. People got so upset, and then they had to change their minds. Which is if you ask anybody, how do you think this is all going to play out? It's not going to look good. So just it's going to hurt in the beginning, but you'll get over it. It's pulling the Band-Aid off, but it's let's pull the Band-Aid off as slowly as possible.
Yeah, let's extend this and make it just troublesome for us. Mm-hmm. Where we have to keep answering it and keep dealing with it. Because you said it, the cover-up is always worse than the initial story. 9 times out of 10, I got to believe that's true. Just like, Ohio State's dealing with that now, and the Colts, this is a horrible PR move. You celebrated this guy. There's all the tweets. You were even the one, retweeting them and sharing them from 2 days before, where it's oh, we lost a legend and all this stuff. It's a mockery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, they didn't have to be super specific, I don't think, in the reasoning that they gave. He's 80 years old. He has problems other times. I know I can't say what he said on
he dropped an F-bomb.
On the radio.
He dropped an F-bomb.
He dropped an F-bomb. He said freaking football during the AFC Championship game in 2006, 2007. But, he did drop an F-bomb in 2016.
Where he said, thank God this is effing over.
Yeah, right. So he had a history of being a little loose at the mouth. So, and he had a long career, too. I don't think anybody would have been that surprised if he just retired in a normal fashion and be like, well, all right, that was a full career. And, if the problems that they had couldn't be resolved, that's, whatever. They didn't have to go into specifics even. They could have just been like, look, we've had some disagreements. He's obviously had some slip-ups before, and we just feel it's time to part ways. How much better would that be than what's happening right now? Now it's a complete... Because I knew as soon as I sent my questions to the Colts, they were just like, oh, what are we going to do? Because they knew the cat was out of the bag. But it was immediately. He's retired on Sunday, and that was what the woman, who contacted me told me. It was I'm seeing this guy get a hero send-off, and it's I really know what happened. And I think that's what eventually led her to... I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I feel like that was at least one thing that motivated her to speak out.
Well, that's because
was seeing the thing from the Colts the way they sent him off.
That's on my list. I actually I have to think that this has something to do with the employee who filed the complaint coming forward. Because here you are, you're okay, I filed my complaint, and he's losing his job. But then the way he celebrated and the way it's all acted out, yeah, I can totally see that. But you're getting off scot-free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So where do we go from here? Do you think? Is this something that you think continues to kind of be a thorn in the Indy area or the Colts, or is this something that they move away from fairly quickly?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. It's kind of hard to move on from something that, like, he was the voice of the Colts. That was his name. I mean, to, like, just sweep him under the rug, it just doesn't seem possible, right? I mean, they've got to wrestle with his legacy somehow. I don't know how they go forward, to be honest. Like, I guess he'll be remembered, like, as a flawed person, and, you know, it's a shame that he had to go out this way, but at the same time, you know, like we said, you know, everyone bears responsibility for their own behavior. So I don't know. I mean, it's going to happen again. To somebody else besides Bob Lamey, because we're in an era of Me Too, and we're in an era of people believing people that things are going on. So I just think the party's over for people that, on a larger scale, that had pretty free reign for a long time. And I'm not just talking about Bob Lamey. I'm talking about prominent people everywhere. Like we hear all these stories about people, at the top. And I think that for like a long time you could operate that way and there was no consequences. And I think going forward, I don't know, we're probably going to have more incidents like this, but people have got to know, like, the world has changed. The world has moved on from where it was. And yeah, it's interesting, and maybe we're nostalgic for a different time, but like it's over. It's now.
I have no sympathy for people who don't clean up their social media, that clean up their Twitter, or any of that, because we're in the era now that if you're not conscious of that, I can't help you, because now you should be I actually, not that there was anything on my Twitter that was going to get me in trouble, but I now have it set up that anything older than a year gets deleted.
Yeah, there's no reason to keep it. I back up my tweets, delete them. Delete your tweets, people. If I could say one thing to the youth, anybody listening that's a kid right now in high school, are you a high school athlete? Delete all of your tweets right now. I've listened to him talk for so long about people that get these old tweets brought up from when they were 16 years old, and now they're going off to the pros or college, and oh my gosh, just delete your tweets, people. They're not that profound, and you'll never look at them again. But just, if you need to back them up, back them up. But this is not a repository forever. Like, it just, you need to delete it. Like it's so concerning. And yeah, you just got to be careful. You got to keep cross your T's and dot your I's. So.
I follow a lot of the high school kids in the area, and some of them will tweet things, and it makes me cringe. I go, well, I hope that one doesn't bite you down in about 4 or 5 years.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, at this point, you're not doing yourself any favors. Go ahead and plug some social media, maybe your podcast. You know the drill.
Oh, for sure, man. Well, hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And, you can find me on Twitter. Lately, I've been tweeting about sports a lot. It's Robaburg, Robaburg. You can read my stuff every Wednesday in Nuvo News Weekly in Indianapolis, Indiana. Nuvo.net. I got all my stories. I got my columns. I got House of Burgess. House of Burgess has its own page now. I'm very excited about it.
Ooh.
It's right on the front there. I'm excited. But the Rob Burgess Show every Friday, dropping hotness for your ears. So just check it out.
Hey, Rob, I really appreciate the time, man. I thank you for kind of walking us through everything and letting us know how it all played out. You're always welcome here on the show, and I do love seeing you tweet about sports stuff, even if it's only going to be for a couple more days.
Absolutely, and 10 years from now, when I finally write my second sports story, we can talk about that too.
For sure, I look forward to it, man. Hey, best to you and the family, and I'll catch you down the road.
Cool. Thanks a lot, man.
Hey, thanks, Rob.
Thanks.
This has been Sounding Off with Chap and Mojo on WIOU.